All right. So anyway, this is PSY105, Infant and Early Childhood Development, Day 2. So before we begin, I kind of wanted to do just a little bit of an icebreaker I've been doing with my other classes. Obviously, this is our first week back, and we've just been enduring so much stress. And I just kind of wanted to check in with everybody in regards to what's going on with, obviously COVID has affected all of us in some way or another. And I'm just curious as to what some of your thoughts are, if you care to share, if, what some of the positive things that have come from this experience and maybe some of the negatives. Anybody care to share?
Sure, I guess.
Okay.
I guess a positive that's come out of like being in quarantine and everything, you just kind of have a lot of time to just kind of relax and think about stuff you never really put thought into before. And you have a lot of time to get back into hobbies like reading or drawing. And that's always good for like the long run, for when you're having like a tough day or something. You have something to fall back on when you can't like hang around friends or something like that. But then that's the negative part. Like if you're an extroverted person or like you just like being around people, being in quarantine, you kind of didn't have that for a while. And then you're just kind of stuck. And then you have to fill that space of what you would have been filling it with spending time with friends or going out with family. You have to just fill that with just being in the house. And that's really just
Yeah.
from my perspective.
Yeah, no, it's I can identify with both of those. I'm not necessarily an extroverted person, but I certainly like to be sociable and go out and do things. But yeah, that's been a challenge. But and we'll kind of touch upon what you're talking about with people being stuck in households with people. Because and how that really feeds into what we do here in this class with child development is safety issues in some cases, right? Because we have a lot of children that their safe haven was really in school, and now they're in these homes, and some of them might not be very healthy homes to be in. So yeah, I mean that so at a sociological standpoint, that's a pretty big issue. Um, so what was your hobby? How do you pronounce your name? Is it Kwamir?
Yeah. Oh wow. I was almost about to just say you can just say Q for short. But yeah, it's pronounced Kwamir. I just read. I've found this app called Webtoon, and it's like comics or little stories that people have made. They do all the drawing and stuff themselves, and they just put out different types of stories for other people to just enjoy and read. So I just read
Okay.
those from time to time.
Okay. All right. Well, what else? Better thing to do during if you're not binge watching, I think reading would be a good alternative to that too, right? Binge
Yeah.
reading, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my hobby has been music. I've been learning guitar and piano, and I can't really see it. It's off to the right back here, but I got an entire music room back there to kind of just whenever I need a break, because I'm here all day. This is about the same view that you see behind me, about 8, 10, 12 hours a day. So
Mhm.
that's my little breakaway there. But thank you, Kwamir. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you,
Um,
Tim.
Anybody else? Anybody else care to share?
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that a positive was like being able to spend more like one-on-one time with like your family and getting to do more activities with them inside. But like the negative is like having to only be able to FaceTime with like other family members that live like further away instead of actually being to like interact with them in person.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So getting used to technology as
Mm-hmm.
your way of socializing. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the cool things, and this kind of piggybacks off of what you're saying, Kirsten, is our how creative we've gotten with various things to kind of fill in these voids of socializing and learning and working. I mean, we've just done things unimaginably compared to a year ago. You know, if you would have asked any of us a year ago, can we imagine doing this? We would, it would have been a resounding no way. But
Yeah.
here we are. So, okay. Well, thank you, Kirsten. Nice meeting you, and thank you for sharing
Nice
that.
meeting you.
Anybody else?
I could go.
All right, go ahead.
I think definitely like losing a routine was hard for me because like I was going to work, going to school, and then just at home. So then you have to like find things to do, and I kind of missed that routine of real life.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did you, do you have a positive that you've identified with this?
I definitely am happy spending time with family. My grandma is turning 90 in September and she lives with us. So I was really
Oh,
happy to be home with her and my parents. So it definitely did have positives.
okay. Well, good, good. Glad to hear, everybody's happy in the household. That's important. So you touched upon something really important also, Amanda, is routine. And you'll hear me echo this throughout the course. I talk about this in all my courses because it's important to understand that the human mind is two things. We are proud and we like routine. I jokingly say we're lazy, but lazy really fosters innovation. It gets us to be creative. And if you think about it, laziness has really driven technology, right? Imagine when I'm going to kind of just date myself here, but when I was growing up about maybe 35 years ago, less than that, 25 years ago, we didn't have cell phones that could you hit a person's name or a picture and it dialed. You had to remember a bank of phone numbers in your head if you wanted to call your friends and family, and that's just what you did. But laziness and routine has really driven innovation and creativity through technology. And we kind of see that now, but and it's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but what you're talking about, Amanda, is just getting into these routines. Our mind likes things to make sense, and our mind likes to think that we're right. And when that doesn't happen, we experience stress. And when we experience stress, we try to do whatever we have to do to reduce that stress, right? Or defend our mind being right. So anyway, that comes into play in so much that we talk about in this course. So just kind of remember those two things. I always say we're lazy and we're proud. That will be the two things, the two keywords if I ask you in the future. But anyway, well, thank you everybody for sharing. How about one more? Maybe I'll, if anybody else wanted to share what they had.
I'll go.
Okay.
How about Jerome? How about you?
I just want to make sure that I was aware of what you said again. We talking about the positives and negatives ever since COVID happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. As far as positive, I would say I want to say really taking the time to help everybody understand that nothing is guaranteed and kind of slowing down life for us. I feel like a lot of us might have been moving at a pace that, we were used to, and it was just every day just moving. But this is kind of giving us the time to take a break and slow down and stuff like that. Negatives, I would just say the days kind of looking the same. And but like you said, repetition can be good. So, I mean, maybe that's not necessarily a negative.
Okay, so all positives then, huh?
Yeah.
But taking the time to slow down, you find that as a positive. Yeah, that we definitely have slowed down in a lot of ways. We speed it up in a lot of ways too, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely.
So kind of works both. So, all right. Well, nice meeting you, Jerome. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
All right. So just a couple of announcements here, and I do want to maybe cover some of the topics in chapter 1, but I have been receiving a lot of emails and a lot of questions and a lot of issues on D2L, and I just kind of want to get to those first. So just some general announcements. First of all, some apologies on my part. I guess there was a code that we needed to provide for Packback, and I was unaware of that. However, I did post that code, so it's in news and announcements under Packback. So if you need to register for that, it's in news and announcements in D2L, so you can find it there. As far as the book, I know a couple of you, a handful of you, not many, as far as I know, I had put up incorrect link that brought people to the wrong book. And I think that was on Sunday or Monday or something, but I caught it and corrected it pretty quickly. However, a handful of you, which were super ambitious, which is great, and I'm glad you were, but that kind of worked against you in this capacity, so that you registered for the wrong book. But anyway, it was just the link. If you got the code from the bookstore or from anywhere else and registered the wrong book that was on the link for D2L, then you'll know, because you will not have access to the book. If you have access to the book, great, and there's no problem. If you don't, I think I made that announcement to reach out to me, and quite a few of you did. I forwarded your requests to Pearson. So what I would need, just to clarify, if any of you are out there that still have a problem with this, all I need is your product code, the access code that you got from wherever, either the bookstore, and then a receipt showing that. And then if you're not able to access the book, the Kale version of Children and Their Development, 7th edition, then let me know and we'll get that fixed for you. Like I said, it shouldn't have affected so many. It was just a couple of you that got right on it as soon as I uploaded that link and then took it down immediately. But okay, so what other questions do you have? Let's start with that, so I know I have enough time. I did this with one of my other classes, and I gave them about 15, 20 minutes, and I think we needed more time. So let's also, James, you're in here with us, right? I think so. I think I see you.
I'm here.
Okay. Yep, I see you. If you would be so kind, if any of you have questions along the way and you're not able to speak or you don't want to be on the recording, go ahead and type them in the group chat, and James will monitor them and either answer them there or he'll read them when I give him a chance to do that. Okay. So what questions do we have?
I have one. I guess it's not really a question, but more of a concern with the pack-back discussions, or no, the asking of the questions.
Okay.
I don't really. I mean, I did it already, but I don't really feel like I understand what sort of questions I should be asking, and if that makes sense. It's kind of weird to explain because it's like, I just did something for another class because we're also doing discussions that have cognitive processes. But she had us read something and then put up a little what we think about it.
Okay.
And it's along the lines of, you kind of put something up, but you don't feel confident in it, and you're not 100% sure if it's like what it's like meeting the standards of what you want us to put up.
Yeah. So what we have built into Packback is, and the reason again I use Packback is because it's really designed to be more engaging than what discussion posts are in D2L. I find I do a lot of online teaching, and I find discussion posts to be rather dry, especially with a class this size, because we're going to have, I think we have 90 people in this class, and if I ask one question, we're going to have 90 people answering the same way, being able to see each other's answers, and it's just really kind of dry. So I'm trying this new service just to kind of see how it works, and so far I'm pretty impressed with it. But I think I understand what you're meaning here is you don't know what to ask, right? You're just, you're supposed to ask a question, you just don't know what question to ask, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll clarify with that is, if you go into your book, or you go through your book, or you go through the lesson, or any topics that we have, and either if it's something that you know or something that you're curious about, just ask a question within whatever that week's topic is. And again, you don't have to necessarily answer it, but just substantiate it with what you read. So for example, for this week, we would talk about, your question would be, how does the psychodynamic theory fit into child development? And below that, where you substantiate it or give a little bit more detail, you could say, we read about Freud and how his contribution was the id, ego, and superego, and we see that develop with children growing up through adolescence, or something like that. Okay, that's just as an example. So it could be anything, and try and be original in there, but it'll give you quality points in there. To answer your question is, how do I know if I'm doing a good job with that? It's going to give you quality points in there, and it's going to tell you right along the right-hand side where it has those little dials and says, this is a most original question, yada, yada, yada. Do your best with those to try and get those green, because I'm going to be very relaxed for the first week. So don't sweat it this week. All you got to do really is answer my question. And if you want to try your own questions, you can certainly do that. But as long as I see that you're trying to do something in there, you're going to get full points this week. Next week, it'll be a little bit different. It's going to be more based on quality points. And we can certainly talk about that if it becomes an issue. Okay. Does that answer your question, Kwamir?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions or concerns?
I had a question.
Okay, go ahead.
For like the group project, how many people do we have to have in a group?
5. So if you're
Okay.
picking your own group, try and pick 5. If you have less than
Okay.
5, I'll probably fill somebody in with that. Okay. And
Okay.
and that's not due until Sunday of next week. So don't, nothing you need. If you want to start getting your group together now, that's fine. But starting next week, we'll start. In fact, well, actually, I don't have week 2 unlocked yet. I'm working on that right now. But you'll be able to see the form. Let me maybe I'll just run over the form with you now, so there's no mystery and you know what it looks like. All right, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see what's happening on my end. All right, can everybody see the D2L snapshot here? All right, so what we're going to be looking at when we get to group 2, of course, you have your overview, resources, discussion, assessment. And under week 2, it's going to be under assessment, and then you'll just click diagnostic. Okay. When diagnostic comes up, all you have to do is click on that, and it's going to give me, it doesn't open up in that window, so I'm going to have to share a new window. Hold on a second. All right, so here's what your diagnostic is going to look like. Right off the bat, I'm going to ask you what your election is. Now, if you want to fill this in, if you want to print it out and then write it in, or if you want to type it in, it's whatever you want to do, as long as you get the information and you can indicate to me whether you want to pick your own team. If so, who are those team members? Now, with this, please make sure if there are 5 of you, and all 5 of you turn this in, each and every one of you are going to turn this in, but all 5 of you turn in the same names, okay? Preferably the same order, but make sure I get last name, first name, or first name, last name, and that way I can compare and make sure everybody's on the same team. Because what has happened in the past is somebody will put somebody on the team here and they don't know about that. So that becomes a problem. So please make sure you're all collaborating and you have the same names, preferably in the same order on this, and we'll be good. If you don't really care about what team you're on, go ahead and either circle or highlight or do something just to indicate that you're choosing number 2 here on this form, okay? If you don't want to partake in the group project at all, and again, I rarely have people that want to do that, or if they do, they regret it because they want to be part of this, go ahead and somehow indicate that this is your option is 3, and somehow sign or digitally sign or do something just to indicate that you acknowledge that you will not be getting anything greater than a C for this course, okay? If you pick option C, you don't have to do anything else, okay? You can just opt out of this, and no group projects or evaluations or anything will come up for you. If you pick 1 or 2, go through this and then just really short answers. It doesn't have to be anything long. But this gives me a little bit, just 15 questions here. This gives me a little bit of background as to who you are and what kind of role you would be best suited within these teams. Because I look at technology, how your use of technology, and if you're familiar with it, I look at your ability to present, if you like to present and be in front of people, or if you're more somebody that likes to be behind the scenes, if you like to write, if you're good at a strong writer, or maybe you prefer leadership roles or something like that. Filling this out will let me know how to best put people into groups. So please do your best and be honest, and then fill this out. And then all you have to do is save it for whatever, on your hard drive or on the cloud or whatever. And then I'll show you where to upload. That's not it. Sorry. All right. So when you're ready to upload, well, we have to do a different view here. Like I said, I view things a little bit differently. This is not going to show me what I need. Okay, so I don't think I have the ability to. So anyway, if you go into week 2, I'll just stop sharing because it's not going to work for me. If you go under week 2 assessments and then click on that, it'll give you an opportunity to submit your documents. You just upload that there. Okay. There's no, I know I mentioned in the syllabus that we'll have peer evaluations. We're not doing there's nothing to evaluate for this upcoming week, for week 2. So don't worry about it. Don't ask about it because we're not doing peer evaluations. We'll do peer evaluations when our first actual group project comes up on week 4. Okay. All right. Does that answer the question on group project and the diagnostic? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Go ahead.
When are the groups assigned?
The groups will be assigned after I get everybody's diagnostic at the end of week 2. So probably around middle of week 3. By the end of week 3, you'll have whatever groups you're supposed to be in.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on in the chats, James?
No, just been, I got them.
Okay.
Cracking a call, but everything's pretty good.
All right.
If we want to be placed in a group by the professor, would we leave all the other names in a blank, or is this for?
You just pick option 2.
Yeah.
Option 2 means I wish to be placed in the group, and I'm fair about it. And in fact, it's kind of fun for me to see how well I do with placing like minds, or not everybody's going to be the same, but I try and get it as close to as possible to your personality types, if I can assess that through that. So it's kind of a fun task for me to see if I can pick people that are going to be successful in the groups, or what groups are going to be successful. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do today then is just cover a little bit about chapter 1 and what we're going to be getting into, because chapter 1 is really an introduction. All right. With child psychology and child development, we have had a lot of shifts in our understanding, in knowledge, and in research on how children learn. And we really have a lot of perspectives that have gone into it. One of them, I'm going to share so I can kind of take notes and you can follow along with me here. All right. So, child development perspectives. Now, what's a perspective? What do I mean by perspective? Sorry about my handwriting. It's better than what I would be using if I had a mouse. So perspectives are the not necessarily theories, but kind of just the way we look at things, right? And we kind of we can understand that, like from a student's perspective, you can see different things on D2L than from my perspective, right? Because I see everything. I see all those weeks that are hidden. I have assignments that aren't really published yet. It's just a lot busier on my end, where you see more of a cleaned up product, right? If you think of web development, you have people that do codes, that do HTML coding, and they're able to picture the stuff in their head. But you, as the end user, when you get on the internet, you see all these fancy pictures and these great menus, and things just make sense, right? So it's really our perspective that guides how we look at things and how we conceptualize, right? So within child development, we have a couple perspectives that we're really going to be looking at throughout this course. First one is going to be the biological perspective. Okay. Now, biological is just as it says. It's about biology. It's about genetics. We look at things such as imprinting, right? So imprinting is the creating of emotional bond with a mother. And that's going to be important. That really shows up in so many of these other perspectives because having that emotional bond is going to be vital for trust, for security, for safety, meeting our biological needs, right? Our basic needs. So that the imprinting in some form happens. We're also going to see critical periods from the not only in the biological perspective, we're going to see it through some other perspectives as well. But critical periods are specific times in the development with specific type of learning that takes place. Okay, and we'll uncover some theorists that came up with some really brilliant ideas as to what they felt happened. Some of them are going to be a little bit more process driven. Some of them are going to be more time driven, like 0 to 2, age 0 to 2, or 2 to 7, as Piaget does, and 7 to 11, or 8 to 11. They're very hard set on those dates. Okay. A lot of them don't, they kind of just use those as a guide. So please be aware. It doesn't necessarily mean when a child turns 3, they're automatically going to be entered into this next stage of their life. It's very loosely based on that, and it's based on a best guess or an estimate. So keep that in mind, especially if we get into doing some kind of observation or evaluation exercises. Just because the child has not entered to that next stage based on their age does not necessarily mean anything. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're delayed. It might show a propensity or a proneness to being delayed, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So you would need to meet other mile markers to make a proper diagnosis of that. The second perspective that we're going to look at is the psychodynamic. Anybody that had general psych or any other psychology course, any guesses as to who was the father of psychodynamic perspective? Any guesses? Nothing. Crickets. Ooh, okay. What'd you say?
Freud.
All right, Madison. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for piping in on that one. Yeah. So Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was probably one of the foremost authorities on the psychodynamic perspective. He really got the ball rolling with that. And what he really was getting at was that our lives are really based on trauma. How we handle trauma, how we negotiate trauma, and what self-defense mechanisms come out of that trauma. And it's really great, and it describes a lot of things when we do see things like developmental delays and trauma. However, there are some limitations to his perspective, is that it's based in trauma. So not everybody's traumatized, right? And if you've taken general psychology, you would probably learn that. But what he really got into was the development of the id, ego, and superego. When we get into development and psychodynamic perspective, we'll talk a little bit more as to what those mean. Another heavy hitter in the psychodynamic perspective is Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory, which again, we're going to actually spend a lot of time with him, so I'm not going to go too much in depth, but he had his 8 stages of psychosocial development, which kind of goes along with Freud's, the beginning of Freud's, but it really develops throughout the lifespan of the individual, which is kind of cool, because a lot of what we see with child psychologists and developmental psychologists is it's really limited to early childhood, adolescence, or maybe adulthood. Erik Erikson developed a theory that really spans the entire life of the individual, okay? The third perspective we're going to take a look at is the learning perspective, okay? So learning, just as the name implies, it's how we learn. It's how we negotiate rewards and punishment, right? If you've taken psychology courses before, you probably heard about operant conditioning and classical conditioning, right? We're going to cover all those. We'll talk a little bit about social cognitive theory, because that plays into how we develop, right? How we socialize with other children, and how we learn from them, they learn from us, and it's kind of a symbiotic relationship growing up and getting better with our communication skills and negotiating conflict. So learning is going to be a big role in how we grow as individuals. So our fourth perspective that we're going to cover is the cognitive developmental perspective. Okay. Now, cognitive developmental is more focused on how children think and how thinking changes as they grow. Jean Piaget is maybe a name that you're familiar with. If you're not, you will be by the end of this class. A lot of learning models, especially in school age children, is really based off of Jean Piaget's developmental theories of child development. So, and I'll go into it a little bit more, but Jean Piaget really looked at children and how they naturally try to make sense of the world. And as they form a better grasp of what's going on around them, they enter into a new stage, and they think a little bit more logically, they think a little bit more abstractly as they grow. And interestingly, with Jean Piaget, he also was one of the ones that says 0 to 2, 3 to 7, 8 to 11, so on and so forth. And again, these are just guides, but he subclassified children within those age ranges to follow suit with what their abilities are, okay? The fifth perspective that we're going to look at is contextual. So contextual perspective really includes everything, and it looks at the whole person concept. It looks at culture. It looks at psychosocial development, and it's one of our probably more modern theories, because looking back at all these other four, they're very limited. They're very limited on how they explain things. Like, for example, psychodynamic is great, but if there's no trauma, it doesn't really explain a lot as far as where defenses come from. Learning, are we just robots? Learning is very limited to what the physical brain can do and how it develops, which is great for some aspects. But when you're starting to talk about personality development and defense mechanisms, learning doesn't really answer everything, right? And cognitive developmental might be very limited on, especially if children are developmentally delayed. So if you have a 4-year-old that's still operating like the less operational stage, the pre-operational stage, then there might be developmental delays, which learning doesn't necessarily help. Psychodynamic might not be helpful, but biological might be more helpful. So that's what contextual perspective does. It just really takes a hodgepodge of these four perspectives and puts them into one, looks at the whole person concept, okay? All right, next lesson, and when we talk about biological, we're gonna get into nature versus nurture. This is probably one of my favorite topics to go over, because it's highly contestable. We can really argue either side of what is genetics and what is environmental. And we'll delve into that a lot next week. But yeah, some fun conversations really come out of what is it that, because you might consider our hobbies to be something that we get from our environment, right? But there are a lot of genetic studies that show that people that are like, especially twins separated at birth, monozygotic or identical twins that are separated at birth, have similar hobbies, even though they're raised separately. So genetics really, really plays a role in much more than what we really give it credit for. Okay. So the area that I want to spend the most time on today is how we do research. Okay. Because how we do research, not only in psychology, but with children, is very, very important, because we're very limited. We have ethical standards that prevent us from potentially doing harm. So if any of you that are going into any kind of research field or working with children, you're going to have to cut through a lot of red tape to do research with children. Okay, similar to prisoners or people with disabilities, certain disabilities. So let's see here. How we measure. Oh, I don't know why. All right. Measurements. So what are some ways that we can get measurements from any kind of population? How can we get data? Like if we went out and wanted to do research, and what are some ways we can do that?
Surveys.
Surveys, yeah, surveys, questionnaires, right? Self-reports, right? Okay, what are some other ways? Oh, can't spell today. Reports. Go ahead.
I was going to say focus groups.
Focus group. Oh, okay. I think focus groups can be run one of many ways. They could be observed, right? So observation, or I think they kind of fall under surveys too, right? That's a good guess, because I think focus groups do fall under observations as well. Okay. Any other guesses?
Like an experiment?
What is it?
Like an experiment?
Okay. Okay. So experimenting measures, which, I'm going to write experiments, but
like I'm kind of thinking how many people walk in. What? No, that would be more like a census.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, you're not far off. And we're going to talk about what experiments are versus observations. Because we can make observations within experiments too, right? We can also get surveys with experiments. We can manipulate one variable and see if it shows up in either a survey or an evaluation of some sort. Either a psychological evaluation where you have a psychologist asking questions or measuring something on either a Likert scale or a yes or no, is this behavior present or is it not present? But an evaluation, either psychological or or otherwise, right? We can also get third-party reports. This one, I don't think this one was in your book. But with children, and when we're doing observations or any kind of surveys or evaluations with children, third party might be important in that. Now, who would be a third party, and why is that important for measuring behaviors?
Would third party be like not parents, but like teachers that they're like in a class? If they're like in a class, if they're a young enough kid, and it's just the one teacher, would that be like a third party, or would it just be focused more around like just family?
It would be, you're right. It's anybody but the child. So the child is like, if we ask the child questions, we would be asking them that, we would consider that a questionnaire or an evaluation or an observation. But if we ask third party, because if you think about it, and this is why this is important, I want to bring it up. Psychologists don't have the luxury of moving in with a child to see how that child interacts with their environment, or their environment is surrounded to better suit them, right? They don't really see that. They usually get to spend at tops maybe a couple hours in a clinical setting. Sometimes they'll have some professionals go out to their homes. But a lot of the information that we get is from third-party reports, from parents, from grandparents, from aunts, uncles, from teachers, from daycare providers, anybody that we can get a hold of. Now, there is a little bit of sensitivity with using third-party reports. Is we got to make sure that it's valid and reliable, right? Because they're not exactly trained to give us exactly what we need. So we might have to educate them a little bit to give us the most accurate information that we need. Okay, but yeah, you're right. You're right. It's absolutely the third party would be somebody other than the child. Okay, so within measurements or within research, I think, and I forget who had responded and said experiments, right? We have two types. We have an experiment. I lost my ability to spell today. Experiment and correlation. Correlational studies. What's a correlation? Anybody want to take a guess?
That's when what's the best way to try to describe it? When like you see there's something going on with one variable and like influencing another variable. So like if it gets hotter outside, ice cream, like people buying ice cream will rise or something like that.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So there is a relationship between two variables, right?
Yeah.
So experiment, simply put, is one variable is causing another variable to change. And the reason why this is important to note is an experiment is something that we design or a psychologist designs, and they influence what we call the independent variable. Okay. So as, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Kwamir?
Yeah, Kwamir, sorry. Thanks. So as Kwamir said, if it gets hot, what did you say? Is it gets hot outside, ice cream melts, right?
Ice cream prices go up.
Oh, ice cream prices go up. Okay, gotcha. Okay. So there is a relationship there, okay? But we don't know if necessarily the heat has anything to do with the ice cream prices going up or ice cream sales going up. So we would need to experiment with that. We would need to somehow expose people to hotter climates, similar people, right? Maybe the same person, put them in a warmer climate and see if they buy more ice cream, or put them in a colder climate and see if they buy less ice cream. What we're doing there is we're manipulating the variable. And I know we can't really manipulate the heat, but we can maybe somehow induce some kind of change in the environment to see if the dependent variable changes. So very important with these two. So what is being manipulated is the independent variable, right? And what we're hoping to see a change in is the dependent variable. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions before?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So correlation, all we're doing is we're observing that there is a relationship between these. We don't know what causes what. All we know is that one is changing as the other one does. And we can, let's see what and we can have one go up. Like for example, let's use the example, marijuana smoking within college students. So the more a student smokes marijuana, and I'm not saying that this is actual, but I'm just kind of spitballing here. We can say that GPA, and so I'm actually going to put this as, oops, THC goes up, use of THC goes up, GPA goes down, okay? We test that, or we notice that, and maybe it could be through surveys, it could be through self-reports, but the more people report using THC, they might be reporting a lower GPA. We don't know what's causing the other. Maybe a lower GPA is causing an increased use of THC. We don't know, right? So anyway, that would be considered a negative correlation, okay? And we measure that by a 0.10. That would be the strongest. That means every time THC goes up, GPA goes down. That would be like a negative negative 1.0. It's very rarely, in fact, it's almost never 1 or a negative 1.0. Okay, just by the way, because that's like perfect conditions ever. Okay, now let's look at something different. Let's say the amount of time a person studies, so study time. The more a person reports studying, what do we think the GPA is going to do?
Go up.
Go up, right? So this would be an example of a positive correlation, or a plus 0.1, or somewhere in there, all right? Now, let's say that the cigarette sales per capita in the US and the sale of lemons in the US. Do you think there's going to be any correlation to either of those two things? Probably not, right?
No.
Right? So we could say without a doubt that there's probably, if not exactly, it's going to be 0.0 correlation coefficient, okay? So again, we're not going to get too much in the weeds with this because I just wanted to re-familiarize you to this information as we go through this stuff. Now, one thing to be careful of, and I kind of put this graphic in just because it's important to see this, is what could happen here is a confounding variable, something that we didn't anticipate happening. I'm going to give you an example. I saw this report in a magazine several years ago, but they said in this report, and it was a British report, that men who shave live longer. Yeah. Okay. They showed the more that men shave, the more lifespan that they enjoyed, longer lifespan that they enjoyed. They showed a correlation to that, and that's pretty eye-catchy, isn't it? If you read that in the news, what would your anybody that shaves, what would you feel? Would you feel that I want to live longer? I'm going to shave, right? So it's really sensationalism sometimes in the media when we hear these things. And I took the liberty of going through this and found that men who shave tend to be in relationships or tend to have higher paying jobs. Okay. Higher dollars. Okay. Now, with these two, they did another correlation, and this is just kind of spider webbed. is men that are in relationships and have higher paying jobs have lower stress. Okay, makes sense, right? Lower stress. They did another correlation that men who have lowered stress, less heart disease, right? Or high blood pressure, which leads to what? Living longer, right? Pretty funny how they do that. So anyway, whenever you hear something sensationalized in the news, it's very important to maybe do a little bit of your own research, because that could really be misconstrued, and could cause a lot of problems if somebody either neglected their health or something in order to achieve a goal based on something like this, because much more things have to happen other than just shaving. Now, you shaving is not going to lead you to a longer life. Relationships have to line up. Your stress has to be low. You can't have any health issues or lowered health risks in order to live longer. Okay. Pretty cool stuff, right? All right. So with research, we're going to be doing, we're going to be looking at a lot of research articles here in this class. I've posted some. We're going to have assignments on some of them where you're reading them. You're going to be searching for your own when you're going to be, when you're working on your group projects. So it's important to understand how these work. So I'm going to share my other screen with you. Well, before I do that, let me kind of just give you the basics of what this screen is showing you right now. So in order to measure conditions, you have to have two variables, okay? So in this case, we have variable 1 and variable 2. So friends condition, not friend condition, all right? These are your two groups. What we have to do in order to accurately test is have an environment that is not going to be influenced by anything else that we can say is different. So for example, if we had two different conditions, one is in a summer condition and one is maybe a little bit further north in winter conditions, that might affect our outcome, especially if we don't want temperature or anything related to temperature affecting our conditions, right? So we make sure that, and when you're looking at research, making sure that you have a standardized setting for both variables. Once you have that setting established, you're going to manipulate the independent variable, what we talked about, right? The manipulation happens only with the independent variable because we want to see what happens with the dependent. We want to see how the dependent is going to change. So we manipulate 1 and we manipulate 2. And then we measure using a standard measurement tool that is going to be sensitive to both of these groups alike. And once they're measured, we're able to get our data, analyze our data, and then state whether or not we can support our hypothesis, our original hypothesis, okay? Make sense? So we either support it or we say we found what we thought we're going to find, or we didn't find anything, okay? So we get into where we're going to be doing a majority. If I ask you to look up any kind of articles, or if you need to look up articles for your groups, here's where we're going to be doing that. All right. It's not what I wanted. Software, there we go. All right, so at the top of your screen in D2L, I was so kind to put a Kemp library link up here for you, okay? So anytime you want to get into the Kemp library, I highly recommend doing it this way. Some people like to put bookmarks, or they like to save the link. I can tell you that people have had some pretty major issues with doing that. So the best way to do that is to go through D2L first, because it logs you in. It knows you're coming from ESU. These are actually a lot of paid journals, and they charge a lot of money to do that, but ESU has included that with your tuition, okay? So databases, when you get into Kemp Library, on the right-hand side, you'll see databases. Within the databases, these are showing as locked. Hopefully this won't be an issue. This is actually the first time this year I've gotten into these. My favorite one is to use psych articles. If you have another one that you find works best, like neuropsychology or child development, I think we do have developmental psychology. Maybe it's not in this one. Psychiatry Online. But anyway, you're more than welcome to search the other ones. I like psych articles just because it's clean. It's the areas that I'm looking for. For example, I don't need anything for what I do. I usually don't need much with psychiatry or biology or animal psychology or whatever. Psych articles deals mostly with psychological issues. So when you get into, so this has changed a little bit since I've used this last. So to get into this, you're just going to click your institution, which is East Stroudsburg, and then your username, which is going to be whatever it is you log into to get into East Stroudsburg. Please work. And it's thinking. All right. May or may not be a good sign. Oh, great. Okay. I had to change my password recently. Maybe it's changed. Okay. One more try here. Sorry, folks. All right, good. Success, we're in. All right. So anyway, it should be your ESU password, whatever it is you log into everything. When you're into EBSCO, you just type in whatever terms you're looking for. So child development and maybe lead poison or something like that. You just type in your terms, and it's going to spit out a bunch of results similar to what you would see in maybe Google or Bing or whatever it is you use. So I'm just going to pick one of these, and you have two ways of looking at it. You can either look at the text, or you can download the full PDF version of whatever this is. So I'm just going to show you the PDF version just so you can see what it looks like and what we'll be doing. So when you're doing your searches, it's very important. Don't get overwhelmed, okay? You're all in your undergraduates. So these are really written at a very scientific and a high level. Just about all of them are. So don't get too overwhelmed with the details. What you're going to pay attention to first is the abstract, and that's usually right here. This is the very first thing that you see. This is going to tell you pretty much summarize what the whole report, the whole research is doing. It's going to give you a brief little introduction, what they're looking for, why they're looking for it, how they looked for it, how they researched it, what they found, and sometimes they usually put like their conclusion somewhere in the end here as well. This just gives you a snapshot of what you're going to be reading. Now, if you need details, because this doesn't really give you a whole lot of details, okay? You can go through these. Maybe sometimes you won't necessarily need much from the introduction, but if you do, it's here in this first part. So it may not be labeled introduction, but if you look back on what I had, oh, actually, I don't think I put that on our slide today. But if you go through these, you'll see your introduction. Somewhere towards the end of the introduction, before they get to the method, this is very long, I know. Resolution, okay, so these are still theories. This is a very, very long one. Most of them are relatively short, and by short, I mean anywhere from 5 to 7 pages. This one is really, really long. So they're just very thorough with their introduction, their background. So they're talking about all these dimensions, and they're just giving you a really good idea. Actually, this might not be, oh, here we go. So hypothesis. So at the end of their introduction, they're going to give you their hypothesis. What are they looking for? Your hypothesis is simply a statement based on a research question. So for example, maybe we wanted to know, does ice cream sales go up when it's hotter out? Okay, so that is our research question. We form that into a hypothesis because we're going to go through and we're going to look that these authors did a very thorough job of going through previous research and telling you what the theories are. You know, in our case, it would be like solar sunspots and you know, cosmic rays, you know, probably, oh, there's actually x-rays in here, that's funny. But anyway, they're going to give you a background of all the theories, and then they're going to say, based on our research question and what we found available, we think that that the sale of ice cream goes up when the average temperature for the summer is plus 5 degrees. That would be a very specific hypothesis. All right. So that's what they're going to tell you here in the hypothesis. Sometimes you have to dig for them, but for the most part, man, this is a long hypothesis too. I don't think this was an experiment. I don't see any methods in here at all, actually. Okay, so this is probably a bad example. So what you would see after the introduction is you would see methods. The methods are going to tell you, let me go back and see if I can find a better one. Instrument for identifying potential repeaters among poisoning victims. Okay. That's not it. Oh, this one will probably be a little bit better. All right. So I'm not going to show you the actual article for this one, but again, after your introduction, you'll see something similar to this. You're going to see a method. This is going to talk about the subjects. It's going to talk about how, who's involved in the study, who are your participants. They're going to tell you how they're measuring it, usually like a measurement device or apparatus, they're calling this one. I've actually never seen that called apparatus before. And then you're going to see a procedure. How are we going to test? All right. And again, this has a lot of information. You don't have to bog yourself down with it. Just understand. In fact, most of the time, you're going to find what you need in the results and in the conclusions. Okay. All right. Any questions on how to use and kind of go through this? You don't have to read through all this stuff. If that abstract doesn't tell you what you're looking for, then there's no real need to go through and read through all of this to find what you're looking for. Okay. You should get a sense of whether or not what you're looking for is going to be in this abstract. Okay. And again, this is just really for, we're not going to do a whole lot with the assignments. I pretty much give you these articles for the assignments, but for your research project, your final group project, you're going to be doing a little bit of digging, and this is going to help you. All right. All right. Any questions on this so far? Are you all with me? Thumbs up? Still hanging in there? Okay, I know it's not very exciting stuff, right? But again, I just wanted to familiarize you with this material, what it looks like, so that way there are no questions when I say go ahead, look up a research article for your group discussions or your group project, because one of them is what sources are you going to be using, and you're going to need to know how to get in there to do this stuff. Okay. All right. Any questions on anything? James, do we have anything in the chat?
Yeah, I got 3 quick questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So first, just to clear with everything, so there's confusion with the books, what's the actual book name and the authors by the book? Just to clear up.
That is in the only place that, and it's nowhere else, but I have it in the syllabus. I have it in the email that I sent you. It's Cale. It's Robert Cale, Children and Their Development, 7th edition. And like I said, I didn't post the wrong book anywhere. I didn't sell it in the bookstore. I didn't put it in the bookstore as incorrect. What happened is, if you got the code and you just happened within that day that I had posted that link with the incorrect thing on Revel and registered to that incorrect thing on Revel, that's where you would have been, caught and needed to have this reset. But like I said, for the most part, I don't think many people, I think it was just, I think I had maybe 4 or 5 people that responded. But anyway, shouldn't be a huge deal for most of you. All right, next question.
With the pack back, are you going to post questions too? And are students allowed to respond to you're not posting anything?
I may. It's not. You don't have to look for mine. And but what this is doing is getting you to interact with each other. I can, if I wanted to ask questions, I would have done the discussion question, and everybody would have jumped on doing that. And that, again, I found that to be dry, especially with a class this large. Everybody's just going to be answering the same thing. And then when you have to respond to somebody else, you got to basically respond like everybody else responded. It's not fun. So anyway, we're going to give this a try and see how it goes. I may post something just for fun, but you certainly don't have to look for me and answer it. Okay. Answer each other. And of course I'll be looking over your responses as well. And maybe I'll answer some of them. I don't know.
Yeah. I have a question about Packback.
Okay, go ahead.
Will we be getting, at least even if it's general, a little bit of feedback on how our first one went, so that we know for the next one if we need to improve in a certain area?
Here's
we're getting all the credit.
I'm going to show this to you. Let me share my screen. So how this is going to be set up is you get into Packback. And we are 105. So everybody can see the same thing. So when I create, if I ask a new question, what this is designed to do is not only ask a question, but make sure that it is a quality question and that you have it substantiated very well through the reading or through some other source. It could be your textbook, it could be internet sources, as long as it's a valid source. So why is the sky blue? I know that's not a very, is the sky blue? Not a great question, right? So I enter that, and let's say Tom Snyder, whatever his name is. Snyder, I don't even know how to spell it. Actually, it's not giving me what I need over here. So let's see here. Your question must end in a question mark. Oh, I see. So question mark. Blah, blah. All right. So what it's going to do is I'm going to put test 2020. And if I were to submit this, it loads it up there. I may not be able to show this to you without showing the grades. But all you really have to, it's not going to show me, oh, presenter mode. Oh, no, it's not doing that. Okay. So all it's going to show you oh, where'd it go now? It wind up at the top. Okay. Actually, it's not grading me because I'm the professor in here. But if you were to do that, if you notice on the right-hand side, it should have little gauges, and it tells you if it's enough. Obviously, you have to post something in here, and if you could substantiate it by entering a resource where it asks you to put a resource, that's going to give you pretty much full credit for this. So this person here, Olivia, put the link in here. Okay. Now that's not. I would prefer that you use APA. I'm not going to require it, but it would be great practice for you if you put APA format in the source. Okay. And then just put it like whatever it is you substantiate. Maybe you got it out of the reading or something. And then of course your question is up here. So if you get those 3 areas and it looks similar to this, you're going to get full points for that post. Now, when you answer, now you'll be required to answer 2 other ones. That's going to give you the rest of your points. I think you get 6 points for the initial question, and then you get 2 points for each answer that you provide as well. Does that help?
Yes, it does. It's actually my post.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. How about that for a chance, huh? Good post. Good post. All right. So was that good feedback for you on your post?
Yeah, that was great feedback.
Okay. What are some other questions here? We got a couple more minutes left.
Someone was asking about the groups again.
Okay. What about the groups?
If we want to pick our own, do we have to have all 5, or can we say we have 2 and then you add the other 3?
That would be fine. If you pick 2, I can add 3 additional, whatever's left over and whoever's looking for a group. Okay.
That's all in the chat so far.
All right. Any other questions here before we depart today? All right. Well, I want to thank every one of you for your participation and your attention today. Hopefully you have a wonderful weekend. I know some of you probably have classes tomorrow, but have a wonderful and safe Labor Day weekend. If you are traveling, I know probably many of you won't be. A lot of things are still shut down. But of course, be safe out there. And I will see you back here on Tuesday, okay, regular time. If any of you have anything personal, I'm actually going to stop recording right now. If any of you have anything